Entering the Mayo Experience.
Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, Mayakoba Golf Classic DraftKings picks and preview. I want to let everyone out there know to go subscribe and download. You don't even need to listen. The audio podcast version of the Pat Mayo Experience. We're in a race for 10 million listens/downloads for the 2018 year. We need to up the pace a little bit. Your reviews always help with that. So whether it's Stitcher, Spotify, TuneIn, Podbean, or on iTunes, please leave a review, sub, download, and then download it again. And then that's two. It's perfect. I did institute a pyramid scheme too that I feel like people are forced to listen to the show. So if you can convince two other people to listen, you don't have to listen anymore. We're going to get two for the price of one here. If you want an out, you need to get two people to come in. It's like joining the army. So that's the way that I would go with it. Last week's winner of the 20 DK dollars credited to your DraftKings account is Galipo 1 or Galipo 1. I think it's French, but either way, you have won the 20 DK dollars, so enjoy that. This week's contest, all you gotta do is give the video a like, leave your DraftKings handle in the comment section, and please tell me your two favorite plays below $7,000 for Mayakoba this week. Joining me on the line from fantasygolfbag.com, the winner of the Masters Millionaire Maker for the second straight week, because our picks were so hot fire a week ago. We got to see if we can keep this rolling. Drew Mathews, what's going on?
Not much, Pat. Yeah, thanks for having me back. It was a good week. It seemed even better for you, but yeah, happy to hit the Bryson outright, a little Sam Ryder top five, and not too bad in the DFS world on DraftKings.
Yeah, the DraftKings world was very good to me. I mean, the biggest soul-crushing moment of the week was Seth Reeves missing the 5-foot putt on 18 to be first round leader. He cashed the each way, which was like 32-1, but it would have been 32-1 plus 64-1, which would have been fantastic. Up a whole bunch of money for it. But Friday, if people weren't paying attention, I gave out 5 bets on Friday just for the Friday. I gave out 2 3-balls. I gave out a head-to-head and 2 parlays. Clean sweep. Ended up 28 units for the day. So anytime that a tournament has shot link, which this week does not, which sucks, that if you use the live stats at fantasynational.com, you give yourself such a gigantic advantage. It's reason, I mean, besides all like the ownership projections, the lineup generators, the rolling stats, there's a new stat that I want to talk about a little bit that Fantasy National has, but those live stats for live wagering are so helpful. I mean, obviously you're not going to win every time, but it gives you a distinctive edge over the house and finding really terrible odds. So that's something to pay attention to. And Fantasy National members last week, I think that there was a total of like 45,000 in total like GPP first prizes. Fantasy National members took home 37,000 of those. I made a big run in the $5. I was up there in second place most of the day, and then I kind of went, ooh, and I fizzled out right towards the end because Cameron Davis needed to go like 8 under. Gary Woodland going 8 under kind of screwed me because I didn't have him, but it was a nice sweat to have. So hopefully we can keep that going again at Mayakoba. Drew, what are you seeing from the course already? It's a coastal course. It could get super windy. Doesn't look like that so far, but do you expect one of these low-scoring tournaments, or do you expect something reasonable like we've seen in previous years?
I still consider like 19 under pretty low scoring. So I'm thinking somewhere around there, 19, 20, probably not too deep in the 20s, but 18, 19, 20, probably around there.
So this being in Mexico, there's a few things to watch out for. Like you have every single year, whether it's WGC Mexico, whether it's this tournament, guys drink the water and end up having to withdraw. Like that seems like a joke, but that's something that actually happens. So be very wary of that even before lock. Like some guys just might pull out last second because they got the runs and they don't want to play anymore. And that could detrimentally affect how certain people play. We're obviously not going to know, but if you can get that information out, then you need to be paying attention to the very last second. And this is, how do I pronounce this? It's Paspalum greens, is that right?
You got it, yeah, Paspalum.
Yeah, they're super slow.
They are slow. And yeah, it's a coastal course, so they got to keep it somewhat tame. If the wind does pick up, they don't have balls rolling off the green. So yeah, it's going to be about 10.5 feet on the Stimpmeter, I think I saw.
Yeah, in the past 2 years, these greens have played the slowest on tour. So, I mean, this is a good question to ask you because you've experienced different types of greens, slow greens, fast greens. I always feel, just by looking at, and this is sort of a results-based analysis, looking at these very slow greens, it really does seem to mitigate the gap between really good putters and really bad putters.
It does, yeah. The I think the faster greens definitely put an emphasis on the better putters. There's a little bit more touch and creativity on the breaks. I would just, caution a little bit. 10.5, it's slow to the PGA Tour standard, but it's not anything crazy. I mean, it definitely does, statistically mitigate that advantage, I guess. But yeah, 10.5, I still consider, a decent speed. I'm not really weighing it too much as far as putting splits this week.
Well, the one thing that I've noticed, even on some of the slower POA greens, places where like JB Holmes has been super successful, that it seems like these really crappy putters put themselves in less danger of 3 putts. So if you're 25 feet away, they can be a bit more aggressive with those putts. It seems to me, at least, where if you have something that's running super fast, that if they want to be aggressive with those putts, they might end up 15 feet past the hole. And that doesn't seem as much in play this week.
Absolutely. No, I 100% agree. The slower greens definitely kind of bring more of the field in play. You're not going to have guys, making a ton of putts on like Siwoo last year. I think he had 24 putts the final round. But yeah, most of the guys are going to fall around the same, 30 putts, 28 putts around.
So I guess the other thing to make note of here is that on Fantasy National, have you seen the new stat, opportunities gained?
I did see it. You're going to have to tell me a little bit more about it and how you're using it, because I've heard different points of view on it, and I'm curious, the guy, the myth and the legend. Tell me how you're using that stat there.
So what it is, it's sort of a combination of strokes gained approach and greens and regulation gained. What it actually weights is putts on the green or from the fringe from inside 15 feet, and how many of those that players generate over the rest of the field in any given round. So, you would say, yeah, we had to pick a number. So you could have said 10 feet, you could have said 15 feet, 20 feet, 25 feet, whatever. But like 15 feet seems like an opportunity to make birdie if you have a putt, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm good with 15. 20 would be like a nice round number for me. But yeah, I definitely understand. 15 is more of an advantage, more of an opportunity for sure over 20 feet.
So that's what this stat weighs, is the number of those types of putts that players generate in any given round against each other. So I've ticked down the amount of birdies or better gained that I've weighted into my model. I've basically I've actually de-emphasized strokes gained approach just a little bit, only because that I feel like opportunities gained does factor in with strokes gained approach. I don't want to have too much of the same thing. And I've basically gotten rid of greens and regulations gained.
Yeah, I like that. That's kind of what we're looking for, right? Just like any other DFS sport, you're looking for opportunities. And if the guy can get hot with the putter, or at least make a couple of those opportunities, that's what you kind of want to key in on. So yeah, I definitely like that idea.
So I think it really translates well to DraftKings scoring, and I think it really translates well to first round leader bets. That if you like, I never take guys basically 80 to 1 and lower, so all the way down to like 250 to 1, depending on who it is. But I think this is a really good tell for the types of guys that are like 125 to 1, 200 to 1, 175 to 1. If they rank really highly in opportunities gained, you can get that hot putting round from them, and if they're already generating so many opportunities that if they actually convert, you're going to cash in on this.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. Those guys that are kind of cheaper, even in the whole week-long event, you think about those guys, probably it's tougher to kind of differentiate, I guess, those lower-end guys versus the high-end guys. So looking at opportunities gained is probably a good metric to gauge those cheaper guys too. So I might look at that as well as the first-round lead.
Yeah, so I've actually factored it into my model this week when I'm doing everything, but it's very notable which names kind of pop up. I've weighted it over the past 12 rounds right now, and you can factor it into your mixed condition model as well. So when I look at it the past 12 rounds, like number 1 is Anders Albertson. That guy just generates birdie looks one after another, which is really nice. Peter Malnati is shockingly up there too, and he is someone who's a very good putter. Ricky Fowler, Sam Ryder, Cam Champ, Cameron Davis, Adam Svensson, Alex Prue, Vaughn Taylor, Neiman, Gary Woodland. There's Seth Reeves popping his head up because the guy has a 5-foot putt on every hole and makes about 20% of them. So that's fantastic. Graham McDowell has been up there over the past 12 rounds. Chez Reavie, Josh Teeter, Aaron Wise, Brandon Harkins, who had that great Sunday last week, had a good tournament here last year. So I think it's valuable information if you contextualize it just a little bit. The one problem with it right now is that it really relies on shot length data, and over the course of that Asian swing, we didn't have any shot length data. Just like this week, We're not going to have any shot length data. So it sucks from that regard, but that's no different than any of the strokes gained metrics.
Correct. Yeah, we don't have any of them. So yeah, definitely further down the season, that's going to be, largely valuable. right when we get in the mix and everyone's played like, 4 or 5 events in a 2-month stretch there. So yeah, that's going to be huge there.
Yeah, so just another reason to come become a member at fantasynational.com today. 3 events left in this season, then boom, get yourself ready, prep for what's coming in January, because we're rolling through the swing season so far. So let's talk the pricing for DraftKings. I'll give my bets at the end that I'm in on already. Maybe you can talk me into some too, Drew. At the very top of the pricing spectrum this week, I was going to say we have Anders Albertson, but we don't. We actually have Ricky Fowler at 11.5. Maybe Albertson should be 11.5 instead of Ricky. Who knows? Spieth is number 2 at 11.3. Finau is $11,000. You also have Woodland and Horschel over 10 grand. Those top 3 guys, Fowler, Spieth, Finau. I think that Finau is most definitely going to be the highest owned of those 3, and I would have a hard time arguing against that. He probably should be.
Yeah. I up in the high end, man. I think I'm going to stick to Fowler out of that whole group. Spieth is definitely iffy off of last week, and Finau, I think he didn't have a decent result at this event. Was it last year or the year before? So I think for me, if I had to spend up over the 10K, and obviously we'll get down into like the 9s and the 8s where there's some pretty good names, but I think the high end, I would just go Ricky Fowler and not really think twice about it. I feel like he's got a good history here. He sets up well, obviously. I definitely like Ricky in this field. Just as far as betting, I'm not going to pay 8-1 on anybody.
Yeah, neither am I, unless it's like Dustin Johnson versus me at the Canadian Open. Then we're fine. Then we can kind of get behind that. I still like Finau a little bit more. I like his scoring upside more. And the one win that little Ricky, a.k.a. Tony Finau, has ever had in his career in Puerto Rico on these similar types of greens. So the slower greens should help him just a little bit, maybe close that gap with Ricky. Ricky played a lot better than Finau did last week, especially in the ball striking department. But I think another week with Finau back over from Asia that he can put a lot of this together. He's not my favorite play from above 10K, but he is the one that I'll be going to secondly. But do you think that he and Fowler will be the 2 high-owned guys and Spieth just won't be owned at all? Because we talked about this last week with Spieth, then all of a sudden Spieth's like 17% owned.
Yeah, I just don't get it. I definitely think Spieth will be the lowest out of those guys. And honestly, I think Finau might be surprisingly under-owned if a lot of people go to Fowler, because I think he's the highest priced guy. He's got good course history, good recent form with all his results. Statistically, he looks great. I think people might shy away from Finau at 11K and go to 11.5 and get Ricky. So I definitely think Jordan Spieth should be lower owned than all those guys, but I'd be surprised or I wouldn't be surprised if Tony Finau is lower than you would think.
Now, see, that's great news because I want to have some Tony Finau in my life, so I'm all over that as it pertains to it. One of the other new things that you can find on Fantasy National right now is the historic DraftKings scoring from the tournament. So how many points did these players accumulate and what was their price during that time? So if we look back at last year's, Ricky Fowler was 3rd in DraftKings scoring with 118 DraftKings points. Number 1 was Patton Kizzire. He won. Number 2 was Martin Pillar. Number 4, was number 4. He ended up coming T3 that year. And then Charles Howell III scored 108 points with a T4 as well. But if there's the one thing you notice, if you look at the top 10 in terms of DraftKings points scored, Ricky Fowler was the only one above, I think it's 9.9. He's the only one inside the top 10 that was above $8,900 last year. So it seems to me this is one of the events where if you want to take a more balanced approach, that it might not be the end of the world. Like there's a lot of really good $8,000 players that I think that are more in the mix this week than just going stars and scrubs. Yeah,
I think this course is surprisingly scoring dependent as well. I think I was looking on Fantasy National, they have the new scorecard now, or at least it breaks it out hole by hole. And there's a good number of birdies to be had on the par 4s and the par 5s. So I think a lot of that comes down to just scoring and guys, making 20 birdies this week. They can really jump up the leaderboard as far as scoring and DraftKings goes.
So the other 2 guys above $10,000 are Woodland and Horschel. Horschel is my favorite play of the week. I bet Horschel. I saw him as low. If you go on Bovada, he's 33-1. That's where I took him. I was looking at some 28 a little bit earlier. He was 25 on 365, but he seems to be rounding out around 28 or 33 to 1 on the DK Sportsbook. He's 30 to 1 right now. But I like Horschel here. When I go back and I look at the previous champions of this event, they're mostly American, for one thing. They're not absolute bombers, which is another thing, and they're really good ball strikers, and they gain strokes off the tee despite not being super long hitters. So you have like your Charlie Hoffmans of the world, Pat Perez, Patton Kazire, even Johnny question marks has won this event before as well. Graham McDowell is another one. So someone who can get hot with their irons, make a few putts, and really keep the ball in the fairway. That really seems to be Billy Horschel to me. He came so close towards the end of the year through the FedEx Cup playoffs. This seems sort of like a spot where he can notch a victory here.
Yeah, I actually do like Billy this week. It's kind of funny with him. When I want to play him, I always feel like I'm going to get burned. It's the times where he's in a group and it's a pivot where no one's going to be on him, or I feel a little uncomfortable playing him. That's when I feel like the best about it. Maybe there's a chance here, but I'm with you. I really like him this week. And, at 10-2, I think he's going to be really under-owned. Got Gary Woodland right there. So as far as picturing this golf course, I think Billy looks like a guy that should play really, really well here.
And I do think that there is some sort of motivational factor, too, where you have like Finau, Fowler, Spieth, and I would group Woodland in with Billy Horschel. But those top three guys, when we think about it, like, do they really need to win here? Like, do they really care? Are they just going to Mexico to party?
Probably, yeah. Just don't drink the water. That's probably just their priority.
Yeah,
I think Billy wants to win every golf tournament he plays. And I don't want to say that those other guys don't. But, yeah, I'm kind of with you where, if they could get off to a slow start, they're probably not going to be that invested in, grinding it out. So I can see that. I can definitely see that narrative.
And what do we do with Woodland? Like, I want to play Steve Woodwind. He's fantastic. He makes some music. He makes some birdies. He's good to go. But Woodland was like 40% owned last week in GPPs. He was like 65% owned in cash. And his hot Sunday, he came through for everyone. Like, what's his ownership going to be this week?
He's going to be over 30 again. I got to believe. I'm looking at one Fantasy National says he was 35% in GPPs. I don't know if that's an average of certain event or certain contests, but yeah, he's got to be about that number this week.
Yeah, that's an average.
Be up there.
That's an average, I think, of the biggest 5 GPPs. But in the $5, I think he was 39.9% owned. Yeah. I want to play Gary Woodland this week. Don't get me wrong. I would play him in cash if I played cash, which I don't. But no, I'm not taking a guy who's 40%. I'm just not doing it.
Yeah, especially on this type of golf course, birdies are there, but like you said, was it 8,900 and Ricky winning with placement points was the only one inside the top 10. I think, going down below that's not a bad fade just to get rid of Gary Woodland this week in GPPs for sure.
And it comes to one of those things where it's not like, oh, hey, I'm fading Gary Woodland. If Gary Woodland misses the cut, I'm doing great, which would be the case. But if Gary Woodland comes 35th, you're still doing great.
Exactly. Yeah. He's so supremely priced that it doesn't take much for him to miss value. And, a 25th place finish or worse, and you're basically beating the field if 35% of them took Gary Woodland, especially in one of those 10K spots. I mean, that's a big, 1v1 swap if, Billy Horschel finishes top 3 or something.
Yeah, exactly. So I think out of those top, I'm only going to play 20 lineups this week, so I'm only going to take 2 of the 10K plus players to build my lineups around. It worked really well with Bryson last week, so hopefully Billy Ho can be the Bryson of this week. But Billy Ho and Tony Finau will be the 2 that I'm taking. I'll fade the rest of the 3. I'm not one to play scattershot at the top. I'd rather play scattershot down at the bottom.
Now, you mentioned this last week, and I think on another show, is the lower odds you tried not to get too carried away with. It's 30 to 1 Billy Horschel. How much lower would you go on that number? Like 25 to 1 gets a little bit too low, or 20 to 1? What's your take on those lower odd guys?
I think 25 to 1. I was on the Tour Junkies podcast this week. Pat was on vacation, so David and I kind of chatted about it. That I think I'll talk about this, I think, on a Christmas show, too, when Feinberg's in here. But I think I'm going to fundamentally change my betting strategy for the year, that I'm going to hit more guys. I've just been playing so many long shots that it takes so many weeks for one to hit that when one of them hits, you're up. You pay for 15 weeks of bets because you're taking so many guys that are long odds. But I want to hit a few winners here now and then. That most of the winners come from between like 18-1 and 40-1. That I think I'm going to make a concerted effort to hit more guys in this range. And I think Billy Horschel right now, if you can get him at 30-1, I would play that. I have played that. If it was 25-1, I'd probably still play that with Billy Horschel this week. I prefer that over like a 16-1 Gary Woodland.
Yeah, like I played Bryson last week and I got a good number at 15-1. But when you just looked at him in this field or in that field last week, it was like, I mean, he should do really well here. Might as well just hit that number. So I'm with you. It's a little uncomfortable, but sometimes you just got to take a stand on those guys you really, have conviction about.
And I don't really feel that strongly. Like if you look at the odds, like 8-1 for Fowler, 14 for Spieth, 14 for Finau, 18 now for Woodland. I guess Finau would be my favorite of those bets, but I don't want to listen. I'm not betting Tony Finau at 14-1. I'm just not doing it.
No, absolutely not. Yeah, Bryson at 15 or 14 is way different than Finau that can't win. So
yeah,
I'm not betting that.
Well, I wrote up. I do this. I do some picks for Golf Digest now. Every Wednesday that comes out, I'll tweet it out if people want to see it. And Bryson was my top bet on the board. It was 14-1 on the odds that they had given me. But I kind of made the point that, well, if we look at the top 5 guys in this tournament, and I believe it was Ricky, Spieth, Finau, and I forget who the other guy was. It was Webb Simpson. That Bryson had more wins than all 4 of those guys combined over the past 16 months. So just bet Bryson.
Yeah.
The guy actually wins.
Exactly.
So this $9,000 level I think is super intriguing because it has Griot in it. It has Aaron Wise in it, who turned out to be a nice pivot play last week. He was on that team that won me a bunch of cash. Charles Howell III, Bo Hostler, Zach Johnson, Kim, Cam Champ, and my main man, Luke List, coming in at $9,000. From this range, I like Griot. I don't think I'm going to be alone on that one, but this course sets up really well for him. Other than that, I'm always playing Luke List, but I can see him going under-owned here. Normally, I would bet Siwoo every week, but I am not betting Siwoo at 28-1. Just he gained 10 strokes putting last week and didn't win. How is that possible?
I saw that. Then he jumps up to 9,200. It's like, can't do that, man. I can't bet it and I can't play him.
No. And the thing is, like we were talking about right before the show, that if he misses the cut or doesn't do well here, then all of a sudden he's 200-1 next week.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
I'll be patient.
He does play the corollary courses pretty well, and he does have a good course history here. Who is it from that range you're really targeting, though?
So I think it's Griot. A really boring play up there. I mean, he's got good course history. He's a super good ball striker, but I think he fits this course kind of like you mentioned, Billy Horschel. So at 9,700, he's probably going to be the guy I get first in the 9K range. Below that, Charles Howell looks awesome, but in 9,500, I have a really tough time pivoting to him from Griot. So I don't know if you have any takes on Howell. And then I'm back on Cameron Champ this week. I think this is a good golf course, even though it's not a bomber's track. I think he talked about in a quote earlier, hitting a lot of 2-irons, which is very prudent of him at this golf course. So if he can hit a 2-iron instead of hitting a bunch of drivers and basically hit it as far as CT Pan, I like Cameron Champ here.
I don't mind Cameron Champ so much. I'm just curious. I would rather play List than play Cameron Champ this week. List has had some success at this course before, and I went through it and I found some corollary courses. So let me see if these 5 that I kind of grouped together. One is this one, El Chameleon. Good corollary course to the course that they're playing this week because it's the same one. Cocoa Beach, which was the former Puerto Rico Open. Corrales, which is the Dominican Republic Open. Harbor Town, and Waialae, where the Sony Open is. I just feel like those are a bit like less than drivery courses. It kind of mitigates the driving distance advantage a lot of players have. They're affected by coastal winds from time to time. So they're scoreable, but it can turn really difficult on a moment's notice. And you just need to keep the ball down the middle, make a few putts, very small greens, and hit your wedges well, and you can have a lot of success. And Luke List has actually had success on a lot of those courses. That maybe Cameron Champ is very much the same way, is that if you take driver out of his hand, although it's such a big advantage that if he's hitting these 2-irons, like List usually clubs down and hits 2-iron as well, that maybe just them keeping it in the fairway is all they need to do.
Yeah, I got hung up a little bit on Luke List on his 2 missed cuts surrounding that top 10. He finished 7th here 2 years ago, but I mean, honestly, Luke List has been surprising me a lot in the last year. Like he was leading over in Europe earlier in the summer. Like he's a different player as far as being more competitive week to week. So I can see Luke List as being a good play. I think I would stick to Cam Champ personally, but it might just be me being a little bit biased of Luke List, seeing those 2 missed cuts. So probably might be a fault of mine, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
Well, the one good thing about List, and the thing that he really improved last season, listen, I'm the biggest List homer in the world. You don't need to believe me on this. I've also bet Luke List at 40-1, so take that with a grain of salt, because I bet him every week. Eventually, he's going to win, so let's put him in there. But his around the green game is actually quite phenomenal. He was top 10 on tour last year from strokes gained around the green, and I think that's something that goes overlooked as a part of his game and really helps him at some of these more difficult tracks if the wind does start to pick up, that his short game is quite good, and Cameron Champs is not as of yet.
No, it's not, but his tee to green game, as far as off the tee and approach, has been unbelievable the last couple weeks. So it's very encouraging on a golf course where a lot of birdies should be made. I like that quite a bit. But yeah, I understand the nod, and especially with Luke List being kind of blasted for being a poor putter, these slower greens should mitigate that, like you said earlier.
Let's hope. Let's pray for Luke List and have it come through. $8,000 range, JB Holmes kicks it off. He played really well through the Asian swing. He played really well at Safeway. I've been using him a lot. I always like JB. Then we have Joaquin Niemann, Sam Ryder, Hot Fire Sam Ryder from Sunday, Ryan Moore, Shez Reavie, Abraham Ansa, the hometown hero, Adam Hadwin, Matt Kuchar, CT Pan, and Scott Piercy. Coming off a really good week. Surprisingly, really good week for Scott Piercy. For me here, I've bet Joaquin Niemann. I'll also play him at $8,800. He's probably not going to have a hole in one again this week, but that guy likes eagles, so let's go. He's another guy that I think that is more talented than Luke List, and eventually he'll get a win this year, so I grabbed him at 45-1. If you can find him anything above 25, I just say bet him every week until he wins, because he's one of those guys that will end up winning, and he'll play lesser events like this as well, and if that's where they're going to price him, let's go for it. Other than that, I really like CT Pan. You mentioned his name earlier. I think this has become sort of an accuracy wedge fest, and those are the types of tournaments that he plays really well, and he generates a lot of opportunities gained in those spots, and he scores really well on par fours. But the big sleeper from this range, and I bet him too at 66-1, Matt Kuchar had a surprisingly good week last week. He lost almost 6 strokes putting through 4 rounds. It was the second worst measured putting tournament of his career last week. The driving and the irons were on. And if you give me a course that, corresponds with like the heritage or coastal courses where you don't need a lot of distance off the tee, you can use your accuracy, use your wedges, and maybe roll in a few hot putts, then Matt Kuchar's the man here.
Yeah, I did see that. And I heard on the Tour Junkies, you mentioned that, and I was like surprised. Like how could you, like at this point in his career, have the worst putting results of his entire career? It's just mind-boggling to me. But yeah, he's hopefully this next year is more Matt Kuchar-esque, and he finishes with some top 10. So I don't hate the play. I think this is a good golf course for him as far as like coming off the tee. He's going to get it in play, or he should position it pretty well. Like you said, Joaquin Niemann is going to be my top play in the 8K range. I mentioned this on our podcast for this week. I know I said last week that the Greenbrier would be the golf course for Joaquin, but man, I really think this is his type of track. Man, it just seems like a ball striker's golf course. He just nuts it off the tee, and if he can make some putts, he's going to be right there. So I'm going to bet him. I'm also going to play him 8,800, just same as you. So I might have to turn into a Joaquin homer for this tournament. And then I really like that JB Holmes call. That one's interesting. I think he will fly well under the radar at 8,900. He did have that good Asian swing, and again, he can kind of club down on some of these holes. I don't mind it. I don't know how he's stacked up on some of those corollary courses you named earlier. I didn't look into that, but I like a little bit of a pivot to Holmes off of Joaquin Niemann, 35% chalk probably.
Frankly, JB just doesn't play any of those other courses. He rarely shows up for Sony. He never goes to Harbor Town, so it's really difficult to figure out. The one thing, he's had a lot of success at Travelers, which is a really short course. Usually when you think JB Holmes, you think, oh, you need like Torrey Pines, where you can really use that driver, get the ball out. Mm-hmm. But I mean, he's had a lot of success at Torrey Pines. Is that because it's a longer course, or is it because it's a slow POA greens? Like, it sort of mitigates the disadvantage that he has putting just a tiny little bit. So I always like him when there's shorter par fours in play, but I think that he can get it out here far enough that he can just wedge his way to being pretty good here. And you don't need to have a lot of him, is the whole thing, because I don't know how chalky Niemann's going to be, and I think that regardless that Holmes is a good pivot, but Sam Ryder is going to be the one who's super chalky, isn't he?
He could be. I'm not on Ryder this week. I think of the many plays where I kind of look at ownership, Sam Ryder is not one that I would chase. I think the talent for Joaquin is much higher than Sam Ryder. So he could be chalky, but I don't know, man. I think the Twitter universe loves Joaquin. DFS in general loves Joaquin. So even off of Sam Ryder's hot start to the year, I still think Joaquin gets the nod there, but I don't know. It'll be very interesting. I'll be very curious where that ownership breaks between 8,800 and 8,700 for most people.
Well, I think that Ryder's going to be equivalent to Joaquin Niemann, but I think Abraham Answer ends up more owned than both of them.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
He's coming off another good week. He's back in Mexico. He has all the narrative going his way. It seems like it just could be a letdown spot for him, though. I don't know. I put it this way. He's someone that I'm going to bet to win because he's 45-1 right now. I like that number, but I probably will full out fade him on DraftKings.
Oh, man. I kind of liked Answer.
Well,
you're scared me.
Put it this way. I like him enough to bet him, but I think that if I'm thinking through how I want to tackle some of these large-scale GPPs, I just think that he could reach like 22-25% ownership. I could be wrong on that. I'll check back later in the week, but he just seems like a good chalk fade to me. And then I can pivot onto Kuchar. I can pivot onto Pan, who are going to have no ownership. And like, I'm looking to Answer at 84. Like, Chez Reavie's at 85. Like, Chez Reavie should be pretty good here.
You would think, but if I remember correctly, when I looked at his results here, they weren't very good, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, in your mind, you would think he would be, oh, yeah, they were all right. 4th and 14th last year, but he had a 74th. He's played here. He'd be fine. For the upside, I'd probably go somewhere else. But, yeah, he's an okay play.
Yeah, so if I don't use any Ryder and I don't use any Answer, I can just kind of, when I talk about like that scattershot approach, like if I was going to use both those guys along with Niemann, I'd have to be so severely overweight to them that it would hurt the amount of guys that I can use. So if I take out two of them, then I can use little pieces of Cooch, which I won't need a lot of. I can use CT Pan, like I mentioned. I can use Chez Reavie, and I think that's the route that I'm going to take.
Yeah, it's interesting because the way this pricing is set up, we'll just say like Joaquin, Ryder, and then you have Answer. We'll just say Answer's kind of in that same ballpark as far as ownership. It makes it very interesting if you're building lineups. If you start off expensive with like a Ricky Fowler or Finau, I think a lot of people, if they start there, they'll start falling into the same, I have 8,700 left or I have 8,800 I want to use. So I think one of these guys will be left out quite a bit. I just don't know where people start building their lineups. And then like you said, with the lineup generator, once you get your pool narrowed down, then you just let the computer do the math and you could end up with a decent mix of these guys and feel pretty good about it. But if you're building them by hand, you'd be like, yeah, I can't go down to Chez Reavie. Well, I have a little bit of money. I'm going to go pay up for Sam Ryder. So it's kind of cool how those optimizers help you kind of, reduce that bias a little bit.
Yeah, it's really helped me a lot. Like, I just kind of like to smooth out my, like, I can set the exposure that I want. If it doesn't match up, I can move shares onto them and just basically make it a flat owner. Like, I'll have 4 lineups with this guy, 4 lineups with this guy, 4 lineups with this guy. And you're right. When I do build lineups by hand, I just get sucked into the same guys in every lineup.
Yeah, to mitigate that or minimize that for myself, like, because I'll build a couple main teams and I'll actually, my second or third guy, I'll pick like as a value play, like almost like in the high 6s or low 7s, so that I don't always end up on those same like low 7K guys for my last guy. That way I end up at like 80, we'll just say 8,700, 8,600. And then I have a little bit of leeway, like, oh, I can move down to this guy. I don't feel like I'm pinned onto one value guy at 7,200, which I felt like I did a lot last year with Damon. He was always like 72 or 73, and I just kept falling onto him. So, yeah, I like that play with the optimizer, and you can kind of figure out your exposures, and then you don't have to worry about, feeling bad about picking Chez Reavie over Joaquin Niemann, even though he seems like a better play.
Let's talk $7,000 range. This is a very cluttered mix of guys. Some of them are going to be super popular, like pretty sure Sung Jae Im and Patrick Rogers and JJ Spawn going to be super chalky. I'm thinking about full fading all 3 of them. For sure, I'm not playing Im. For sure, I'm not playing Patrick Rogers, but I'm such a sucker for JJ Spawn.
Yeah, Spawn's interesting. I am going to play Im. I'm not interested in Patrick Rogers at all, really. I didn't even look into him much yesterday. With Sung Jae there, I like that 7,800 number quite a bit. Yeah, and Spawn there, and I think it's a Keith Mitchell week, to be honest. So
Me too.
I like Keith Mitchell at 7,600. Do you? Good.
Yeah, I always like Killer Keith. He played well in Dominican Republic last year on a very similar resort course and conditions where he was able to club down a little bit and kind of go after it. Very windy conditions that tournament as well. So I like the way that he's able to score. Like, he doesn't need to come inside the top 10 to finish inside the top 10 in terms of DraftKings points this week. So I like him from that perspective. I also really like Pat Perez.
Ugh.
No one wants. No one wants to use him. Like, he played well when he won this tournament. What did he do right before that? Played really well in Asia. What did he just do? Played really well in Asia again.
Yeah. Oh man, I just 20 lineups. I can see throwing him in there. Optimally speaking, I can't do it to myself. But yeah, he's got the upside. He's like one of those guys, man. You go down to the mid 6 or mid 7K range, and he has the upside to just pop and win this event. So it's kind of a scary fate in that regard. But yeah, I'm not entirely sold on Pat Perez this week for myself.
So the other guys there, like, I like Killer Keith. I probably won't be using Kisner. Theoretically, he should set up really well for this course. Just I have no feel for him right now. Chris Kirk, I find super interesting coming off a pretty good week. Then you have Chappell, Cam Davis, and Sam Burns, 75, 74, 74. I'm going back to the well. I'm using all three of those guys.
Yeah, Cam Davis is fine, and Chappell is interesting. I looked into him a little bit earlier today, and he's coming off some decent finishes over there in Asia. So he's on my list, or attempting to make it onto my small list. And I don't know if I can go back to Sam Burns, but he just burned me too bad. But I mean, you gotta look at talent. You gotta think, these guys have bad weeks and they bounce back. So he's going to be low owned for sure. I don't mind that play one bit.
Yeah, he had a really bad week. The one good thing about Sam Burns is, besides destroying 33% of my lineups last week and taking my outright winner money and my top 5 money and my first round leader money, he was sitting at +9 going into his final back 9. So after hole 28, he was +9. Then made like 5 birdies coming down the stretch to finish out his round. I was like, all right, here we go. That maybe he got some momentum back just a little bit. Yeah,
that's pretty good take there. Yeah, if you get a little bit of momentum, you go through the whole event and you finish on a high note, you go to another event, you can kind of keep that going. It sounds strange, but these guys get kind of mental and they think that momentum can carry over, and they just make it happen. So yeah, I like that actually.
Yeah, he ended up gaining, like, even when you look at his numbers from across the board, like shot length wise, they're not like horrible. The putting's not great, but which is strange because he is a good putter. So you hope that maybe whatever his putting woes are now, maybe just, I mean, you can speak to this better than I can. Like, there must be stretches when you're playing that sometimes it just, you're in a funk, you hit one good shot, then boom, it just kind of clicks and you're back. That's a thing, isn't it?
Big time. Yeah, that's what's the sad part about golf is we're all like mental midgets as far as it doesn't take much to just completely destroy your confidence, and it doesn't take much to completely flip the switch and feel like you're back in it. That's kind of why Jordan Spieth is such a scary fade some weeks, because you thought for sure it's going to turn on and he's going to play good, but it just hasn't. But yeah, any of these guys, any given week, they can just like find it for a couple weeks. I think that's what we saw from Damon earlier in the summer. It's just part of it, man. It's a mental game for sure.
So what do you make of, there's 2 Euro like rookie, like amateur type guys in the field. One of them is Adria Arnes from Spain. I know I pronounced that correctly, but do you have any interest in him or the Norwegian dude, whatever the hell his name is? Victor Hovland?
I didn't do much research into Arnas, but Victor Hovland, I'm a little bit interested in. It's I don't know if you dug this up, but they had a amateur event, like a world championship amateur event at this same golf course a couple months ago, and I think he finished 2nd or 7th, something like that. So he's played this golf course before, and he's played pretty well, and that was on a world amateur stage, so not quite the PGA Tour level. But I have some interest in Victor, and then the Arnas guy, Arnas. I didn't look into him much. I just saw his recent results have looked pretty good, but I haven't recognized him on the European tour. I don't know what tour he's playing.
Well, the last like big event that he played was like in April, when John Rahm won the Spanish Open the week after the Masters. He played there and got cut.
Yeah, probably not going to go there. Too big of a question mark for me. But yeah, the Hovland guy is pretty solid. He's won the U.S. Amateur. I mean, Bryson's won the U.S. Amateur, so that's good.
Yeah. So was Patrick Rogers, I believe.
No, I don't think he won it.
I thought he did. I thought that
Ryan Moore did.
Ryan Moore did.
No,
that was years ago.
Yeah, that was like 15 years ago. Yeah.
Anders Albertson, I'm going back again.
Yep, me too.
And Graham McDowell I'm going to use as well. He's won this tournament before. He's kind of under the radar, like covertly playing well right now.
Man, I played him on some European tour events like a couple weeks ago, and he let me down at like the British Masters or something like that. So I kind of skipped over him making the trek back to the United States for however long he's been over there in Europe. But yeah, that's not a bad play. It's a coastal golf course. He loves coastal golf course. He won the Pebble Beach. He won the U.S. Open at Pebble Beach and stuff. So Graham's interesting for sure.
I'm kind of convinced that he's never won a tournament that hasn't been on the coast, like ever.
Probably true. And he's from Ireland, and basically Ireland is the coast. So, maybe he just likes that water.
Yeah, so he's won this tournament. He won Pebble Beach. He won Heritage. Like, there we go.
There you go.
Eventually, he's going to be live at like the Honda Classic one year or the Sony Open or whatever. But yeah, I'll use a few shares of Graham McDowell. Not a lot of exposure. He's $7,200. Kevin Streelman was the only other one, $7,100 that I had a lot of interest in. I always like him at shorter courses where, his supreme accuracy isn't. His lack of distance and supreme accuracy isn't going to leave him behind. And he's just such a good ball striker that he seemed like I mentioned, like Hoffman, Perez, Kazire, Graham McDowell is like the only non-American to take this one home. But like Brian Gay, like old, boring American players do really well with this course.
Yeah, because it's just like get it in front of you and then get it on the green. There's just not a lot of, I guess there's thought that goes into it, but it's not like I have to muscle it out there, just place it. So that kind of goes back to your point on Kuchar. That's quite why I kind of like him this week. It's a sneaky play. But yeah, I'm definitely on the same page.
What about Streb? We've talked about Victor from Norway, but like Streb's coming off a good week. He's right there. Is his game back?
I don't think his game's ever back. I think he just pops for a week and goes away. I have a hard and fast rule to not play Robert Streb. And until DraftKings has web.com events on for any golf contest, yeah, I'm not going to play Robert Streb. He's so hit or miss, man. He'll like last week he gained 7.9 strokes tee to green, but he hadn't gained any strokes tee to green since June or in the end of July. Like, no thanks. I just rather go somewhere else.
All right, who below the $6,000 threshold are we looking at this week? Remember, if you want to get in a draw for 20 DK bucks, and Drew, you can enter the draw too. It's a draw. You can enter if you need. I don't think you need the 20 DK bucks after winning $1 million, but hey, any 20 bucks counts. But if you just leave your two favorite plays in the $6,000 range, along with your DK handle in the comment section after giving the episode a like, boom, you're in that draw for 20 DK bucks. The guys that I'm looking at: Carlos Ortiz, Burgoon, Damon, Munoz, JT Poston, Bryce Garnett. Those are the ones that I kind of want to play.
Yeah, I at the high end of the 6K, I like Danny Lee this week. I haven't played him in a while, but tee to green, he's been very consistent, and he apparently doesn't pop with his putter. He just is a decent putter because he's been kind of gaining a little bit of strokes putting, and then he lost a little bit at the Dell Championship. So I like Danny Lee of this golf course. Decent iron player, long iron player. I think he can play well, and he's had like 8 made cuts in a row, so I do like that. Below that, the one guy that I'm mainly eyeballing is Alex Prue, and I think he's at 63 real cheap.
Yeah, Prue.
Did I mispronounce it?
No, Prue really popped for me as well. He was one that kind of just leaped off the page.
Yeah, I liked him last week as well, and 6,300. I think he's been a very consistent player for a good while now. Looks really good tee to green. Can't putt, apparently. Just awful putting splits the last couple events. But, in the 6K range, you got to look for something with stability. And his ball striking apparently is fairly stable. So I would at least rely on that at a $6,300 price tag. The other guy there is Richie Werenski. I'm a little bit interested with Mr. Werenski on this golf course. I think he played decent in Texas at the Fort Worth Invitational or something like that, and it's a less than driver golf course. So I like Richie here at this at Mayakoba.
Yeah, I like Richie too. He's coming off a pretty good week, gained 3 strokes with approach, lost a few around the greens, came 23rd, but if he comes 23rd again this week at that price tag, you're doing really well. Back to Prue just for a second. Prue right now, over the past 12 rounds, it's a very short sample, but that's what we're looking at, is top 20 in strokes gained approach in this field, top 10 off the tee, top 10 in par 5s gained, and top 10 in opportunities gained. He does rank 118th in putting, but if he can just have an average week, he's looking pretty good.
Yeah, I feel like the putting we all talk about is probably the most variable stat. And, I feel like there's a better chance of his ball striking to kind of stick around like it's shown for the last couple months. And then his putting turns around and you got a top 10 play out of $6,300 guy versus, his ball striking completely loses it this week. So, yeah, I like the upside for Alex Prue. And he looks like he's been pretty solid tee to green. That's 90% of golf really is getting it from the tee to the green. And if he's doing pretty well with that category, I like that quite a bit.
So what you're saying is don't take Wesley Bryan?
Yeah, I probably wouldn't put him in my top 131 players this week.
Poor guy. Like, is going to flip back for him at some point?
It probably will. I think it just becomes mental, and he's got a tough time. This for a golf course where you don't have to hit a lot of drivers, I guess he could maybe get it around and make a cut, but I just don't think the upside's there, and that's kind of what you want, especially in GPPs. I just don't see him just flipping the switch and finishing top 5 or something like that. So I'll be passing on Wesley for a little while now.
Any love for your boy Svensson, who missed the cut last week? I think this kind of sets up better for him. He's not a deep hitter, so this could. He's still top 10 in opportunities gained over the past 3 events, and he was awful last week.
Yeah, he's interesting. I think if I'm trying to be selective down here, I think I would go Prue over him and try not to spread it out too much. But yeah, Svensson, I did like last week quite a bit, so I would not jump off the wagon. But Prue, I just like a little bit more tee to green, and he's got all the made cuts. I feel like I can have that safety there.
Yeah, so I'll probably pass on Svensson. Maybe I'll throw him into 2 lineups potentially, but he's definitely going to be on the first round leader card. Just because, again, when I search by opportunities gained, all those guys, I want to play Seth Reeves again so badly. That might just save him to be a first round leader. That might be the best course of action for Seth this week.
It's probably some juicy odds on them for first round leads too.
He was 125 to 1 last week, and like I said, he just needed to make 1 putt, 1 tap in putt, and couldn't do it. Piece of crap. Killing me out here. So I have Prue.
I know.
Munoz is just a first round. Honest to God, just make him a first round leader bet every single week. The guy makes a run every round, and then he just bogeys it all away. But eventually, it's going to stick.
Yeah, he's not bad for week long either. He's not doing anything spectacular, but he's kind of getting the ball around and making cuts. This course isn't like a Bombers type of golf course, but it is lower scoring. So, he should have plenty of birdie opportunities. So I don't mind Mr. Munoz here.
The last one I'll throw out that I'm definitely playing, Brendan Harkins. He's below $7,000. He had a real hot Sunday at Shriners. Very good event in this tournament last year. I'm going to keep rolling with him.
Yeah, I do like Harkins. He's sneaky. I don't think anyone ever talks about him. And finished 10th last week, 25th here last year. Yeah, I like Brandon Harkins. And I haven't watched him play, but it just looks like he's a pretty good ball striker, which is what this course will require.
It is. If you just want to go the 3 guys I talked about that have played well on these types of tracks on Paspalum greens in the past too, Scott Brown, Bryce Garnett, JT Poston are the 3 guys that just seem to do well on these resort Mexico courses.
Yeah, for sure.
Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I don't mind that at all. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say that's going to make them find their way into 2 lineups out of 20 or something.
Yeah, see, I feel like you could almost waste shares with only 20 lineups by just sprinkle them in, but you kind of got to mix it around. You don't want to rely on one 6K guy, and if he misses the cut in half your lineups, it kind of burns. So
yeah.
It's tough.
I'm going to be pretty vigilant at the very top of just completely fading guys. Like I said, no Fowler, no Spieth, no Woodland, no Wise, no Howell, no Zach Johnson, no Champ, no Siwoo, no Answer, no Ryder. It really does condense my core, and that I can have those guys in 50 to 60% of my lineups. And if I use 10% Bryce Garnett, then I use 10% Bryce Garnett.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. That way you got your core pretty much, and you've got hard and fast fades, and then you're just, if one of those other guys can finish well and you hit the nuts, and then you're back in the top 5 again for the drive of the green like you were last week pretty much. So
yeah, just
yeah, I mean, that's a good strategy.
Just need it to stick. Like, it's one of these things where you're either all in or all out. Like, I've raked myself so many times by just trying to play everyone that if I'm going to, like I said, take that scattershot approach, I want to do it from the very bottom. Last guy to talk about, Big Norm, who I'm not calling Panda because he's not fat like Panda Pablo Sandoval, and like, that's Pablo's name. Just call him Big Norm. And until he actually does something besides like fade away and miss cuts, I don't want anything to do with him.
Yeah, I'm not on him. I think he's supremely talented, but yeah, when you're dealing with making money, it's not I don't think that's a winning proposition there. So I might just bet him, maybe take a top 5 for him or something like that. But I spent too much money waiting for this made cut that just doesn't happen. So yeah, I'll probably pass on Mr. Norman Zhang.
He got into the mix at Sanderson for a little bit, then melted away. It was on that drivable 16th at Sanderson. He like put it in the tree, and then he got like buried in the bunker on his provisional, and just it was just a mess. I like him as a talent moving forward, and I think you're right. Like a top 5 bet is probably the best way to go about it instead of playing him on DraftKings. I do want to throw out the bets that I've made so far that I'm in on. And one of them was only there because I let Barnett talk me into betting Jose de Jesus Rodriguez at 400 to 1. A $3 bet on the win, $3 bet on the top 5, just because the guy that he was talking to plays on the Latino American tour, really likes the guy. So I was like, yeah, you know what? $3, let's do that. Not a real bet though. So actual bets, I like Billy Horschel. I like him at the 33 to 1. I like Luke List at 35 to 1. I like Abraham Anser and Joaquin Niemann at 45 to 1. Those are my big 4. The other 2 that I'm in on, below 100 to 1, I like Matt Kuchar with the each way at 60 to 1, JJ Spawn 66 to 1 with the each way, and I'm always throwing down on my main man Munoz 275 to 1, very minimal bet on the outright win and on the each way top 5 along with that. I'll have my first round leaders thrown out Wednesday night as well, but you can expect to see Munoz on that. Spoiler alert. So who are you liking so far?
Yeah, I like the Horschel call, and I like the Neiman call. The other one that you didn't mention, I like Matt Kuchar, and we haven't finalized our card for the Fantasy Golf Bag yet, but you know, we're trying to stick in that, you know, mid-tier around 50 to 1, and then we'll throw in like 100 to 1 that just looks like he has the upside. So we haven't pinpointed that guy yet. But, yeah, I'm with you as far as looking for some of those mid-tier guys, like 30 to 50 to 1. I think a lot of winners come from that range, and it's nice hitting at 80 to 1 or 150 to 1. But, again, you kind of got to look at the field and realistically who has chances to win or who have shown that they can win, and a lot of them come from that 30 number.
You know who might be a decent play? Chris Kirk at 80 to 1.
Yeah, I like Chris Kirk, DFS wise too. 80 to 1 is a pretty good number. I would be interested in the top 5. The top 5's got to be what, 15?
I mean, if I play, that's why I play. So I always play an each way on anyone who's 50 to 1 or over, because as it pertains to the each way, like the top 5 odds will always be shorter. But if you play it with the outright and the top 5, you get 1/4. So it would actually be 20 to 1 for a top 5 for me in anyone playing outside the United States.
Gotcha.
So,
yeah, I do like Chris Kirk this week. This is a good golf course for him.
Yeah, he can go make birdies and bunches. Like I said, he's not a super long driver. He's a really good ball striker. Just get hot with that putter and you're good to go. And he's so much more like, why is Jamie Lovemark 75 to 1? What has Jamie Lovemark ever done to get this much credit every single week in the odds?
Nothing. I don't know. I'd put him at 120 or 110 probably. Yeah, he doesn't do anything. Has he ever won on the PGA Tour?
No,
I don't think so.
He once lost to Chris Stroud in a playoff when I had money on him.
That was nice of him.
Yeah, that was great. Him and Ben Ann lost to Chris Stupid Stroud.
Yeah, Chris Stroud, and he's gone nowhere too. So
hey, Chris Stroud plays well at this tournament, by the way.
Does he?
Yeah, he does. He has a good history here.
Is he in the field? I just passed over. He hasn't been playing very good.
I don't think he is he has no odds, so I don't think he's in the field.
He's listed.
Oh, well, they're not
6,400.
60. Oh, he's 250 to 1.
There you go. Yeah, he made the cut last week, surprisingly. Lost 6 shots off the tee, but yeah, that's besides the point. Yeah, he's won an event, and then I don't know what happens to these guys. But they somehow manage to stay on tour every year and still make $600,000, $800,000 a year.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Chris Stroud, being a veteran, knows the ins and outs of how to keep your tour card. You get that? Well, he's still playing off his Zurich win from 2 years ago, I think. That's how he's retained his card. But you'll see him pop up at, like, he's not playing Riviera, put it that way. Like, he's playing the events he knows he might have a shot to come inside the top 10. Like, you'll see him in Memphis for the St. Jude, and you'll see him at the Quicken Loans, and you'll see him at this event, in the Sony Open. Like, FedEx Cup points outside of majors are all created equally.
Right. Yeah, they know where to kind of make their money. They'll go to those off-week events or those weaker fields, and they'll just cash it. We had the Up and Down podcast with Jeff last week, and so you can go out there and listen to that. But next week we have Damon Green, and just a point on that, he mentioned Zach every single year he meets with like his caddy, his coach, his psychologist, and they look at his stats, and then they figure out for his schedule, what sets up good for him, what does he just like, and then they make their whole schedule, and they always have breaks after 3 weeks. So I thought that was really interesting of a guy that I didn't think was so data-driven, I guess, to look at his stats at the end of the year and plan his whole schedule around that. So I'm sure a lot of these guys like Stroud and maybe some of these other guys look at the fields and stuff and plan their whole week or their whole year around those certain weeks.
I think that's a super sharp move, and I think you're going to see more and more golfers go towards a lot of the analytics just solely based on the success that Bryson's had.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense for sure. Like, why not just take out that variable or at least use that information to your advantage instead of just blindly like, I like going to Orlando because my kids like Disney. Well, that might be a good idea if you have a family, but let's focus on playing the next week where this course sets up better for me or something.
Yeah, like I always go back to this. I think it was Hunt Analytics, maybe it was the 15th D. I forget what it was, but they basically ran an analytical preview or just result-based preview of how to play the 10th hole at Riviera. If the pin location is towards the front, you should always go for it. If the pin is towards the back, you should always lay up. It's one of the two. I forget what it is now. But it's very clear that where the pin is placed on the green should dictate what you do off the tee. It's like people don't even listen to it. Like it's like a 2-stroke difference.
Yeah, that one's tough because it's so short. I think they drive it, but that makes a ton of sense because like you have certain holes where the pin's up front, and it's nice to have a full wedge shot in where you can spin it versus like think of a par 5 and you get it down there like 50 yards. Well, now you got a little half wedge shot. It's not going to spin as much, and you got a front pin. That was a really poor choice on your half. They should be using more of that. I think a lot of guys do, but it's still golf, and it probably doesn't always show in kind of how they play, unfortunately. But yeah, it's definitely going that way. NFL is going that way. They talk about third down conversions and all this stuff. So I like where everything's headed.
Yeah, I think it's if the pin is at the back, that if you end up going for it on the green and you hit it over the green, you're basically fucked.
Yeah, well, I think if you just miss that green, you're just screwed. That hole sucks. You see guys, they're making double bogeys and they're there and won.
Yeah, well, I mean, if the pin, I believe it's if the pin's at the front and you miss it long, you have so much green to work with that you can get up and down still, at least give yourself a birdie shot and make par. But if you go over and the pin is in the back, like you might 4-putt.
Right. So you're saying like between clubs, like you're better off just taking short out of the equation, go over the green in that back bunker, and you have better chance of trying to like needle it onto the front of the green or something like that.
Exactly. And if the pin is at the back, it's so hard to get it up and down that you're just kind of screwed.
Yeah. I'm with you.
All right, cool. Drew Mathews. Check him out on Twitter. Check him out at fantasygolfbag.com. And you got other stuff to pimp. That Feinberg interview you did was pretty good. I listened to the whole thing. It was fantastic.
Yeah, he kept playing with like some type of stick. I think he was like playing with a musical instrument, fiddling around or something. But yeah, that was really fun. I enjoyed kind of hearing y'all's background and hearing him talk about Tim Anderson and all that stuff. So yeah, definitely go check out that on iTunes, Fantasy Golf Bag Podcast, and that's the Up and Down series. And then yeah, like I said, next week we have Damon Green, who caddies for Zach Johnson, and he talks about them winning the 2007 Masters, then the 2015 British Open, which is pretty remarkable if you think about he won at the Masters, which is Augusta, and then he won the British Open at St. Andrews, the home of golf. So, if you had to pick 2 golf courses to win a major, those are pretty good. So, yeah, that was a really good interview. Talked about his process each and every week and stuff like that. So, a lot of good stuff happening. We like putting out content outside of just DFS and trying to mix it up a little bit.
All right, Drew Mathews, thanks for being on again, man.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it, Pat.
All right, I'm Pat Mayo. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at the PME. Check out my cheat sheet on DKPlaybook.com. Become a member of FantasyNational.com. Drew and I talked about all the new stats, all the tools. Members took home over $35K just on DraftKings alone last week, so you might want to become a member. Get yourself acclimated now with how to use the site, and boom, when those GPPs become huge again at the beginning of 2019, you'll be completely prepared to take advantage. Over 2 million in winnings from last season alone. We're going to try to top that this year. Subscribe to the Pat Mayo Experience podcast wherever the audio downloads can happen. Always free, on demand. Download it. You don't even need to listen to it, but make that push for 10 million listens and downloads for the calendar year of 2018. Just want to let you know that the odds and lines are subject to change. See the website for actual odds. Or if you or anyone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call 1-800-GAMBLER. I'm Pat Mayo. Good luck at Mayakoba. I'll see you next time.
That Mayo experience! Experience!